leather chair felt cold beneath me as Dad's lawyer cleared his throat. The estate of Thomas Brooks in its entirety passes to his son Evan Brooks. My brother leaned back, arms crossed, a smile playing at his lips. The business, the house, even Dad's vintage watch collection, everything. My mother sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, not looking at me. Not once. I gripped the armrest, my knuckles turning white. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the heavy silence. The lawyer shuffled his papers, his eyes darting nervously between my face and a sealed cream envelope sitting untouched at the corner of his desk. Evan's smirk widened. He'd won, or so he thought. My chest tightened. 3 years of caring for Dad, managing his medications, sitting through endless hospital visits while everyone else lived their lives. And this was my reward. The lawyer's hand hovered over the envelope. He swallowed hard. "There's another document," he said quietly. The room froze. Even Evan's confident posture faltered for just a second. "My name is Rebecca Brooks, and I've always been the invisible daughter. Growing up, Evan was the golden child. Loud, charming, always center stage at family dinners. He could do no wrong in Dad's eyes while I was just there, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who kept things running while Evan chased dreams in Miami, calling it business. When Dad got sick 2 years ago, I moved back home. Evan sent flowers twice. I held Dad's hand through chemotherapy. I learned to read his medication schedule like a second language. Mom visited when convenient, but mostly she stayed at her condo, saying the hospital smell gave her headaches. Dad and I grew close during those months. He asked about my work, my life, things he'd never cared about before. For the first time, he really listened when I spoke. But even as we sat together in those quiet hospital rooms, I heard the whispers. Mom on the phone, telling relatives, "Evan will handle everything when the time comes." It stung, but I told myself caring for Dad wasn't about inheritance. It was about love. Dad's 75th birthday party happened 6 months before he died. The whole family gathered at the estate. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone dressed up and pretending everything was fine. Dad's health had declined, but he insisted on celebrating. Halfway through dinner, he stood up, glass raised, and announced, "I have something for my son." My stomach dropped. He pulled out a set of keys and dangled them in front of Evan. "The Merceds, and you'll be taking over the company operations soon." The room erupted in applause. Evan stood, shaking hands, accepting congratulations like he'd earned something. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, forcing a smile that hurt my face. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. When Evan sat back down, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Guess you're just not built for leadership, sis." His breath smelled like wine and victory. I wanted to scream. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom and cried silently for 10 minutes before returning to the table. As Dad's illness worsened, I became his full-time caregiver. Evan called once a week, always with an excuse. Meetings in Tampa or closing a deal in Orlando. Mom showed up on Sundays, staying just long enough to feel like she'd done her duty. But I was there, every day. Every night when Dad woke up confused and scared. I learned to read his moods, to know when he needed silence or conversation. Slowly, something shifted between us. He started asking real questions. "What do you want from life, Rebecca? What makes you happy?" We'd never talked like that before. One afternoon, while I was organizing his medications, he watched me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for," he said softly. I laughed it off, but his words stayed with me. A week later, I found a letter on his bedside table, partially hidden under a newspaper. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. It was addressed to my daughter who stayed. My hands trembled as I picked it up, but before I could read it, the nurse walked in and Dad asked me to help him to the bathroom. When I returned, the letter was gone. 3 weeks before Dad died, his lawyer visited the house. Mr. Harrison arrived with a briefcase and a serious expression. Mom ushered me out of the living room immediately. "Give us privacy, Rebecca." I stood in the hallway, listening to muffled voices through the heavy oak door. I couldn't make out words, just tones. Dad's voice, weak but insistent. Mom's, sharp and impatient. When the door finally opened, Mr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. He nodded at me briefly and left. I walked back into the room. Papers were gone, and Mom was pouring herself a drink even though it was barely noon. "What was that about?" I asked. "Estate planning," she said curtly. "Nothing you need to worry about." Dad sat in his chair, looking exhausted. When Mom left the room, I knelt beside him. Dad, he just patted my hand and closed his eyes. That night I heard Evan on the phone with someone, his laugh echoing through the house. She actually thinks she's still in it. God, this is perfect. My blood ran cold, but I said nothing, not yet. The night before Dad died, I sat beside his hospital bed. His breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle. The machines beeped steadily, marking time we didn't have. He opened his eyes and found mine. His hand reached out, trembling, and I took it. "You'll understand everything soon," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't lose faith in me." Tears blurred my vision. It sounded like a riddle, not comfort. What did he mean, understand what? His grip tightened slightly, and he pressed something small and cold into my palm. "Keep this safe," he breathed. I looked down. A key, small, brass, old-fashioned. The kind that opened antique furniture. "Dad, what?" But his eyes had already closed again, his breathing evening out into shallow sleep. I tucked the key into my pocket, my heart pounding. A nurse came in to check vitals, and I stepped outside for air. When I returned an hour later, he was gone. The machines flatlined at 3:47 a.m. I held his hand until it grew cold, that mysterious key burning a hole in my pocket. The funeral was a production. Evan played the grieving son perfectly, shaking hands, accepting condolences, his eyes appropriately red. Everyone treated him like royalty. Dad's business partners, old friends, distant relatives, all of them gravitating toward Evan like he was the son. I stood off to the side, holding a wilted flower someone had handed me earlier. When it was time for the eulogy, Evan stepped up to the podium. He talked about Dad's legacy, his vision, his strength. Every word sounded rehearsed and hollow. People dabbed their eyes. Mom sat in the front row, nodding along, her hand clutching a tissue. When Evan finished, she stood and hugged him tightly. "Your father would be so proud," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she walked past me like I was furniture. After the service, as people filed out to their cars, Mr. Harrison approached me quietly. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder. "Rebecca," he said in a low voice, "can we meet privately next week? There's something we need to discuss." Before I could answer, Evan called his name, and Mr. Harrison hurried away. Mr. Harrison's office smelled like old books and leather. I sat across from his massive desk, my hands folded in my lap, waiting. He looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling. "Your father made several amendments to his will in his final months," he began carefully. "However, your mother and brother insisted the primary document remain sealed until the court reading." I leaned forward. "What kind of amendments?" He hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to say." "Not yet, but Rebecca, I want you to know that your father was very deliberate in his final wishes." Something in his tone set off alarms in my head. "Mr. Harrison, what aren't you telling me?" He shook his head. "All will be revealed at the proper time, just be prepared." I left his office more confused than ever. That evening, I remembered the key Dad had given me. I drove to the estate, letting myself in with my old house key. Mom was at her condo, Evan at some meeting. The house felt empty and haunted. I went to Dad's study and found his old mahogany desk. The key fit perfectly into the bottom drawer. Inside, I found a leather journal. Dad's handwriting filled the pages, shaky but readable. I sat on the floor of his study, reading by lamplight. The entries started 8 months ago, right after his diagnosis worsened. "I've been blind," one entry read. "I trusted Evan to handle business, but he's been bleeding the company dry, making deals that benefit him, not the legacy I built." My hands shook. Another entry, dated 3 months ago. "Victoria manipulated me when I was weak. She kept Rebecca away from important discussions. I see it now. She wanted Evan to have everything." Tears streamed down my face. Page after page of regret, of Dad slowly realizing how he'd been used. The final entry, dated just 1 week before he died, made me gasp. "If she's reading this, the real will is safe, and she's the only one who deserves it. The truth will come out. I made sure of it." Below that, in careful letters, "Forgive me, Rebecca. I was wrong about everything." I clutched the journal to my chest, sobbing. He'd known. In the end, he'd known. The next morning, I called an emergency family meeting. Mom and Evan arrived at the estate looking annoyed. "What's this about, Rebecca?" Mom demanded. "I have a spa appointment." I placed the journal on the dining table. I found Dad's journal. He wrote about everything, the manipulation, the way Evan was mismanaging the company, the way you, Mom, kept me away from him. Evan's face went red. "You're making things up. Dad was confused at the end, everyone knows that." Mom grabbed the journal, flipping through it. "This is grief delusion, Rebecca. You're seeing things that aren't there." "Read it," I said firmly. She slammed it shut. "Your father left everything to Evan. Accept it." I stood my ground. "Dad wrote about another will, a real one." Evan laughed, but it sounded forced. "You want to challenge the will? Go ahead. You'll lose everything, including what's left of Dad's reputation. You'll make our family a joke." His eyes narrowed. "Is that really what you want? To destroy Dad's memory because you're bitter?" I looked at both of them. "I want the truth." I spent the next week gathering evidence. Dad's old accountant, Mr. Pierce, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. He was retired now, silver-haired and kind-eyed. "Your father came to see me about 6 weeks before he passed," Mr. Pierce said quietly, stirring his coffee. "He wanted to update some documents, said he needed everything done properly this time." My heart raced. "What kind of documents?" "A complete revision of his will. He was very specific. Had it notarized, witnessed by people outside the family. He didn't trust the process anymore." Mr. Pierce leaned in. "He told me to store the documents separately in a safe deposit box only you and I could access." "Why you?" I asked. "Because I'm one of the few people he trusted completely, and because he knew your mother would never think to ask me." Mr. Pierce pulled out a small key, identical to the one Dad had given me. "This opens the box. When the time is right, we'll present it." I felt hope for the first time in weeks. "Will you testify if needed?" He nodded. "Your father was my friend. I'll do right by him." I filed the contest with the court on a rainy Tuesday morning. My attorney, Samantha Wells, a sharp woman in her 50s, walked me through the process. "This will get ugly," she warned. "Your family will fight back hard." "I know," I said. Within hours, my phone exploded. Evan called 6 times, leaving increasingly angry voicemails. "You're tearing this family apart." Mom sent a text. "How dare you disrespect your father's wishes?" I didn't respond. That evening, Evan showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. I opened it, keeping the chain lock on. "What?" He looked disheveled, panicked. "You need to drop this now." "No. Rebecca, please, you're embarrassing yourself. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind." I stared at him. "Funny, Dad thought the same thing about you near the end." His face twisted with rage, but I closed the door before he could respond. Later, Samantha called. "The court date is set, 6 weeks from now." Then she paused. "There's something you should know. The lawyer representing Evan, he used to work for your father, changed sides after your dad died." My stomach turned. "Can we trust the process? We'll make sure of it," she promised. During the discovery phase, Samantha uncovered a bomb. "Look at this," she said, spreading bank statements across her desk. 3 months before your father died, significant assets were transferred out of the business accounts." I scanned the numbers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moved to accounts I didn't recognize. "Who authorized this?" "Your mother. She had power of attorney." My blood ran cold. But Dad wasn't mentally incapacitated then. He was still making decisions. Samantha nodded grimly. "Exactly, which means these transfers might constitute fraud. She was moving money while your father still had legal capacity to handle his own affairs." I thought back to that day the lawyer visited, the closed-door meeting, Mom's sharp tone. She'd been covering her tracks. "What does this mean for the case?" I asked. Samantha smiled, but it wasn't warm. "It means if we can prove this, everything changes. The court won't just look at the will. They'll investigate the entire estate management." She pulled out another document. "And there's more. Evan has been using company funds for personal expenses. Cars, trips, designer purchases, all charged to business accounts." "Dad knew," I whispered, remembering the journal. "That's why he changed everything." Evan tried one last intimidation tactic. He cornered me outside my apartment building on a cold morning. "You're embarrassing yourself, Beck. Everyone's talking about you, saying you've become obsessed, unstable." I kept walking. He grabbed my arm. "This vendetta is making you look pathetic." I stopped and turned to face him. My voice was calm, steady. "Let go of me." He did, but his eyes blazed. "You have no proof of anything. That journal, Dad was on heavy medication. Nobody will believe it." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Slowly, I slid copies of the bank statements across the hood of a nearby car. "These show Mom transferring money illegally. These show you stealing from the company. And these," I added another set, "show the paper trail to Dad's real will." Evan's face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I picked up the papers and walked away. Behind me, I heard him slam his fist against the car. That afternoon, Samantha called. "He's rattled. His lawyer reached out about a settlement." No, I said immediately. We're going to court. She laughed. Good, wait until they see what's in the envelope. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, a judge's bench that seemed impossibly high, and rows of seats that filled quickly with curious onlookers. Word had spread about the Brooks family drama. Mom sat on one side with Evan, both dressed impeccably. I sat with Samantha on the other side, my heart hammering. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Monroe, took her seat. "We're here regarding the estate of Thomas Brooks," she began. Mr. Harrison stood and presented the first will, the one everyone had seen. My stomach twisted as he read the familiar words. All assets, properties, and business holdings passed to Evan Brooks. Evan relaxed in his chair. Mom's lips curved into the smallest smile. I felt sick. But then Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. His hand trembled as he reached for the cream envelope I'd seen in his office weeks ago. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "There's another document, sealed by the late Mr. Brooks himself, with explicit instructions that it be opened only in the event of a will contest." The room erupted in whispers. The judge banged her gavel. "Order!" She looked at Mr. Harrison. "Proceed." Mr. Harrison's hands shook as he broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the silent courtroom. He unfolded the document slowly, his eyes scanning the first page. A gasp escaped his lips. "Your Honor," he said, his voice unsteady. "This document is titled Last Will and Testament Final Revision." The courtroom exploded. People leaned forward, whispers becoming shouts. Judge Monroe slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Quiet, I will clear this room." Silence fell, tense and electric. Mr. Harrison continued reading. "This document, dated 6 weeks before Mr. Brooks' death, explicitly states, 'This supersedes all prior wills and testaments. It reflects my true wishes, made with sound mind and full legal capacity.'" I couldn't breathe. Mom's face had gone white. Evan sat frozen, his earlier confidence shattered. Mr. Harrison kept reading, his voice gaining strength. "I, Thomas Brooks, leave the entirety of my estate, including all business holdings, properties, and personal assets, to my daughter, Rebecca Brooks." The room erupted again. I felt tears streaming down my face. "There is one condition," Mr. Harrison continued over the noise, "that she continues the charitable foundation we established together, ensuring the Brooks legacy serves those in need." Mom whispered something I couldn't hear, but her expression said she'd known this was possible. The judge called for order, her gavel working overtime. Samantha squeezed my hand under the table. "Breathe," she whispered. Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. "Furthermore, the document states, 'To my son Evan, I leave my father's pocket watch and hope he learns the value of time and integrity.'" Evan's face turned purple. "This is insane," he shouted, standing. He was sick, manipulated. "Mr. Brooks, sit down," Judge Monroe commanded. "One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." Evan collapsed back into his seat. Samantha stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit additional evidence. Bank records showing fraudulent transfers made by Mrs. Brooks under power of attorney, while Mr. Brooks still had legal capacity. Documentation of Mr. Evan Brooks misusing company funds. And testimony from Mr. Richard Pierce, the family's former accountant, who witnessed the signing of this will." The judge reviewed the documents Samantha handed up. Her expression grew darker with each page. "This is serious," she said. "I'm ordering a full investigation into the estate management over the past 2 years. All assets are frozen pending review." Mom finally spoke, her voice breaking. "I was just trying to protect the family." "By stealing?" I couldn't help myself. Judge Monroe looked at me. "Ms. Brooks, I understand your emotion, but let the court handle this." She adjourned for the day, setting a follow-up hearing for 2 weeks later. The news spread like wildfire. By that evening, the story was everywhere. "Brooks family fortune battle, hidden will reveals shocking truth." Local TV stations ran the story. Business journals picked it up. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Some supportive, others just fishing for gossip. Evan's business partners began distancing themselves. 3 announced they were terminating contracts. His carefully built network crumbled in days. Mom retreated to her condo, refusing visitors. Her society friends, the ones who'd always admired her perfectly curated life, suddenly stopped calling. I felt no satisfaction in their pain, only exhaustion. A week after the hearing, Mr. Harrison called. "Rebecca, there's something else." My stomach dropped. "What now?" Your father left one more surprise, a video recording to be played only if the second will was opened and validated. When? Tomorrow, at my office. You, your mother, and brother are required to attend. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Dad had thought of everything. The next morning, we gathered in Mr. Harrison's conference room. Nobody spoke. The tension was suffocating. Mr. Harrison set up a laptop and pressed play. Dad's face filled the screen, gaunt but clear-eyed. Dad stared directly into the camera, his voice weak but steady. If you're watching this, then the truth has finally come out. He paused, gathering strength. To my daughter Rebecca, you were my conscience. In my final months, you showed me what real love looks like. Not obligation or manipulation, but genuine care. You asked for nothing and gave everything. This estate, this business, it's yours now. Not because I'm trying to punish anyone, but because you earned it through character, not birthright. Tears streamed down my face. He shifted slightly in his chair. To Victoria and Evan, you taught me a painful lesson about trust. I built an empire thinking legacy was about money and power. You showed me it's about values. I hope someday you'll understand what you've lost, and it's not the inheritance. His eyes grew sad. I loved you both, but love without respect is hollow. Rebecca respected me enough to tell me hard truths. You only told me what I wanted to hear. The video ended. The room was silent except for Mom's quiet sobbing. Evan stared at the blank screen, his face unreadable. I wiped my tears. Thank you, Dad, I whispered. Even in death, he'd given me closure. The investigation moved swiftly. Financial experts combed through years of records. What they found was damning. Mom had transferred over $400,000 from Dad's accounts in the 6 months before his death, much of it after he'd lost the capacity to consent. She'd forged his signature on multiple documents. Evan's misuse of company funds totaled nearly $200,000. Luxury cars, designer clothes, trips to Vegas, all charged to business accounts as operating expenses. The district attorney's office got involved. Mom faced charges of elder financial abuse and fraud. Evan faced embezzlement charges. Their lawyers scrambled to make deals. One afternoon, Mom's attorney called. Mrs. Brooks is willing to return the transferred funds and accept probation if you'll ask the DA to show leniency. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted them to face full consequences, but another part, the part that remembered Dad's final words about forgiveness, hesitated. I'll think about it, I told the attorney. Samantha advised against mercy. They tried to steal everything from you. I know, I said, but I need to decide what kind of person I want to be moving forward. 3 days later, I had my answer. Mom's attorney presented the settlement offer in a bland conference room. Mrs. Brooks keeps the condo. She returns all transferred funds. She accepts probation and stays out of your life. In exchange, you ask the DA for reduced charges. I looked at Mom across the table. She'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Gray streaks in her hair, dark circles under her eyes, all her polished elegance gone. Do you have anything to say to me? I asked. She looked down. I thought I was protecting our family's future. By stealing from Dad, by lying to me. I never meant, her voice broke. I got so focused on preserving the lifestyle, I lost sight of everything else. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest she could manage. I turned to the attorney. I'll agree to the settlement on one condition. She writes a letter to Dad admitting what she did and why, not for court, for herself, to face the truth. Mom's eyes widened. That's all you want. That and your absence from my life. You made your choice, now live with it. I stood. And tell Evan the same offer applies. Return what he stole, face consequences, and stay away. I left the room without looking back. Later, I donated half of what they returned to the foundation. Some battles you win by walking away. Evan showed up at my office one final time. Security called up asking if I'd see him. I almost said no, but something made me agree. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled suit, nothing like the polished man who'd smirked at me in the lawyer's office months ago. What do you want? I asked, not inviting him to sit. To tell you that you were right, he laughed bitterly. About everything. Dad saw through me and I was too arrogant to notice. I waited. I spent my whole life trying to be what I thought he wanted. The confident son, the business leader. Turns out he just wanted someone honest. Evan met my eyes. You think you won? There was no anger in his voice now, just emptiness. I didn't win, I said quietly. Dad made sure I didn't have to fight anymore. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I'm leaving, taking a job in California. Fresh start, different name probably. Evan, don't, he interrupted. I don't deserve your pity or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that somewhere under all the ego and stupidity, I did love Dad. I just didn't know how to show it the right way. He turned and walked out. I never saw him again. Among the final items Mr. Harrison delivered was a small envelope, separate from everything else. Inside was a handwritten note from Dad, dated the day before he died. His handwriting was barely legible, shaky from medication and weakness. But the words were clear. Rebecca, if you're reading this, then you know everything now. I'm sorry I took so long to see the truth. I was proud, stubborn, blind to what mattered most. You showed me that strength isn't about control or power. It's about showing up day after day with love and integrity. The foundation we built together, that's my real legacy. Not the money or the company, but the good we can do. Please continue it, not for me, but for all the people who need help. And remember this, forgiveness is freedom, but never confuse it with forgetting. You owe no one your trust once they've broken it. You earned everything through character. Never apologize for that. Love always, Dad. I read it 3 times, tears falling onto the paper. Then I had it framed and hung it in my new office, right behind my desk. A reminder of the hardest lesson Dad ever taught me. Sometimes love means letting go of people who refuse to grow. 6 months later, I stood at the entrance of the newly renovated Brooks Community Foundation. We'd expanded the mission, focusing on elder care advocacy and financial literacy programs. Families who couldn't afford proper care, people like Dad who might be vulnerable to manipulation, they all had a place here now. Volunteers greeted me warmly as I walked through. Former employees of Dad's company, people from the community, even Mr. Pierce who joined our board. The foundation had become something bigger than I'd imagined. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, reporters asked about the family drama. I kept my answers brief. My father believed in giving back. This foundation honors that belief. One reporter persisted. Do you feel vindicated after everything that happened? I thought carefully. Vindicated isn't the right word. I feel like I finally understand what my father was trying to teach me at the end. That real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. The headline the next day read, Daughter reclaims father's legacy by giving it away. Samantha texted me the article with a smiling emoji. You did good, kid. The foundation thrived. Applications for help poured in. We hired staff, expanded programs, made real differences in people's lives. It was exhausting and fulfilling in ways the business never had been. This was the inheritance that mattered. 1 year after Dad's death, I drove to the cemetery on a quiet Sunday morning. The grass was green, well-maintained, peaceful. I found his headstone easily, the granite marker simple but elegant. I sat on the ground beside it, not caring about grass stains. Hey, Dad, I said softly. I thought I should update you. A breeze rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of fresh flowers from other graves. The foundation is thriving. We've helped over 300 families this year. Mr. Pierce says you'd be proud, though he tells anyone who will listen that he always knew I could do it. I smiled, pulling a few weeds from around the stone. Mom and Evan are gone. Different cities, different lives. I don't hate them anymore. Mostly I just feel sad for what we all lost because of pride and greed. The wind picked up, and I wrapped my arms around my knees. You were right about everything. The truth did outlive the lies. And forgiveness really is freedom, even when it means keeping distance from people who hurt you. I stood, brushing off my jeans. Thank you for trusting me with your real legacy. I won't let you down. As I walked back to my car, I didn't look back. The empire Dad built was in good hands now, not because I'd fought for it, but because I'd never stopped caring about what really mattered. He gave Evan the assets, but he gave me his legacy, and that was the real inheritance.